hello, welcome to another episode of Textory. If you don't know what Textory is, we dissect historical text and we usually find some parallels to the modern day, but it's all very fun, it's all very unserious, so let's jump into it. I am really excited about today's topic because I am a cat person. I think I also am a dog person. I used to have a dog for many years. But there is definitely something about cats that fascinates me, and because I have one now, I am sort of up to date with their behavior versus the last time I've had a dog was over, 13 years ago? So I am basically out of touch with being a dog owner versus being a cat owner. So I am a cat person, and if you've ever wondered where that even started, like, have humans always been obsessed with cats? The answer is yes and no. So we did have pets, we had cats, we had other animals, but what can be called cat fancy, which is basically being a cat person in like older terms, has roots in 19th century. What I mean is obviously cat ownership as a hobby, cat ownership as a source of pleasure. You don't actually need them for anything. You can afford to have an animal in your house for basically nothing. So cat fancy has started in the 19th century. So the date that most people agree on as an official start of cat fancy is 1871, because that's when Crystal Palace Cat Show was first organized by Harrison Weir. And this is basically credited as beginning the cat fancy. So this is what pushed people to be like, you know what? I actually want a cat now. There were 20,000 visitors at the cat show. It was actually so popular that they had some problems with the crowds. Like, they were not really controlling the crowds. And it was so successful that they hosted another one in the same year. And actually, people quickly realized that, wait a minute, I can monetize this idea. And London had 2 more private cat shows the same year. And there were also cat shows hosted in Edinburgh and in Glasgow that year. What I find interesting is that working class people were also allowed to compete in the Crystal Palace Cat Show, which is not that obvious. Like, we all remember, well, some of us, we don't remember, we didn't live in that era, but we all know that, for example, working class people struggled entering the football industry because football was reserved for gentlemen for a long time. Anyway, today we're talking about Francis Simpson, who was an English writer. She was a journalist. She was a cat lover, a cat person. She also breeded cats, and she was a cat show judge. And she happened to attend the very first Crystal Palace Cat Show in 1971 when she was 14. And clearly it had a massive impact on her. If we were to use modern terms, I would say it had started a lifelong autistic special interest, because she basically ended up dedicating her life to cats and cat knowledge and studying cats. In 1886, she won second place in one of the categories of the Crystal Palace show. We know that because there is an article clipping of her winning that, basically. But she probably participated in many more competitions with her cats. She wrote numerous books on cats. She wrote articles for magazines that were appropriately called Our Cats and Fur and Feather. She went on to become a judge in the shows, and she also organized shows herself. She participated in cut clubs. She also never married, so she lived up to that stereotype. And she lived with her brother most of her life. Basically, if you think you're a cat person, she probably beats you in every aspect of it. She did it like twice as much. And what I find interesting is that she was more or less a working class woman. Her father was a reverend. So she, being unmarried, had to basically make a living. And this is what she did. She found her niche. She was one of the only people in Great Britain that were focusing on cats and basically studying cats. And she would just sort of freelance for all these magazines, and she would send them her articles. And because her insight was so deep and so interesting, they would just buy the articles from her, which I find really interesting, because being a cat writer a female cat writer in the Victorian era sounds like a risky career choice, but she made it work. Anyway, I think this is all from the introduction. Before we get into it, I completely forgot to remind you guys of my Patreon. So if you enjoy this podcast, I also have a podcast-related Patreon where I talk about some stuff that I've read, some stuff that I found during research, some stuff that did not make it into the podcast. So if you enjoy that kind of things, if you want to keep the podcast running, go to my Patreon right now. Not right now. Listen first. Anyway, let's jump into the text. The text that we're reading today is called Cats and All About Them. It's from 1902 and it's by, you guessed it, Francis Simpson, the OG cat lady. Those who have had a long experience with cats or kittens know how impossible it is to lay down a hard and fast rule regarding their feeding and management. As with human beings, so it is with cats. They have their likes and dislikes, their dispositions vary, and their constitutions are totally different. If we wish our pets to thrive, we must study them individually, not collectively. There's a saying that what is one man's meat is another man's poison. And I have known some kittens to grow fat and look well on food on which others have dwindled away. So far, so good. I did not find anything controversial in what she's saying. It is a mistake for a novice to start with a large number of cats, for failure is sure to follow. 2 good females is enough to begin with, and these would probably be indoor pets. Good advice again, don't adopt 5 cats at once because it's going to be a mess, especially if you've never had a cat before. Kittens are no trouble to settle down, but with grown cats it is very different. And it is well to find out from Pussy's late owner whether she had been a house pet or cattery cat, as well as her favorite diet and whether she had been used to sawdust or earth in her sanitary pan. Okay, let's unpack this because it's a lot. First of all, she's talking about bringing a cat home. So basically what she's saying is it's much easier to bring a kitten home because they don't actually know what's going on versus a grown cat who's afraid of things. That's the first thing. Second thing is the use of the word pussy in this particular text. It's very prominent. It keeps popping up every now and then, and every time I get a jump scare because it's just funny. Third of all, a cattery cat is a cat that's being kept outside in an enclosure. And also, a sanitary pan is basically litter box. So they've already used litter boxes back then, which I think is really interesting. And they've used sawdust or earth in the litter box, which honestly, if I was a Victorian woman, that would make total sense to me. Because what else could you use when litter was not produced yet? You know, the kind that we use nowadays. Her happiness on entering a new home depends greatly on her own disposition. Some cats do not seem to mind a change of abode and ownership in the least, and are most affectionate and demonstrative on being liberated from the basket. They will eat anything that is placed before them. Unhappily, there are others that, as soon as they find themselves in a strange place, are frightened and miserable, and will rush into the furthest and darkest corner of the room, under a chair or sofa. Not gonna lie, my cat is sort of like that. Like, we brought him home when he was a kitten, so that wasn't an issue. But every time we took him on like family vacation or to the countryside, because he actually enjoys new places. He enjoys them once he's getting used to them. But the first couple of hours are a mess. Like, he's hiding somewhere, he's scared, he's walking with his belly almost touching the floor, which is quite sad to see. We've mostly just stopped taking him anywhere because we don't want the stress, and he also hates traveling. But yeah, he's definitely the kind that would hide under a chair or a sofa. It is kindest in these cases to leave Poose alone for some time. Then try by gentle persuasion to coax her out of her hiding place with a saucer of milk or some tidbit. She may refuse all food for 2 or 3 days, but before long she will get accustomed to her new surroundings, and at the end of a week or 10 days will probably be perfectly happy and contented. Again, this is kind of true. Like, if you just leave the cat alone and give him time to adjust to the new surroundings, most of the time it will be slowly getting to know the new situation and it will become nicer to you. Of course, for the first few days, it will be necessary to keep windows and doors shut, and to show her constantly the pan she is to use, or to take her into the garden so as to teach clean habits. If, when she is in the garden, you find she has made a sudden dart, do not attempt to chase her. It is the worst thing you can do. Wait until she is inclined to stop and look about. Then call her gently. You will probably find she does not want to run away, but be careful how you take her up. Some cats will not be handled and will struggle and fight and scratch and bite. But a cat cannot escape if you catch her by the skin at the back of the neck. I do not mean that you should keep her in a hanging position, but your right hand would be holding her neck as you nurse her in your left arm. Cats are naturally timid. And it is curious to note what antipathy they have as a rule to men, though they will grow as devoted to a master as to a mistress. But a strange man's step fills them with alarm. Again, a lot to unpack here. First of all, they suggest that you can either make a cat learn to use the litter box, or you can make it use the garden, which I find interesting because my cat could never, he will literally run away. She's like, no, they won't run away. Call them gently back. Nah, my guy's gone. He's buying a plane ticket. And also, I wonder, I've tried the skin hack, maybe once or twice on my cat. It does not necessarily make it freeze as much as I thought it would. So I wonder if it's possible to keep it in your arms, hold it by the neck, and then nurse it with the other arm. I think you're going to end up scratched anyway. Another controversial claim that she's making is that cats are naturally timid, which she has not met my cat. Oh, and the last claim is that they're afraid of men. I wonder if that's actually true. Maybe men are just bigger, but then in that era, in 1902, a walking woman with all the swishing petticoats and skirts would actually make it probably more terrified by all the sounds she's making. So I don't think that's necessarily true. The golden rules to observe in the feeding of cats are regularity and moderation. An authority on cats recently told me that the primary cause of the majority of the ills that the cat is subjected to is overfeeding and the consequent overtaxation of the digestive organs. This is something my cat needs to hear because, my guy, you don't need that much food. You have eaten. Now, this whole part is interesting to me because we learn what they fed cats back then. And I wonder if the names that she's dropping are actual cat food or just some companies that produce something else, because I'm not actually sure. But she says, for breakfast, a solid meal of some food, such as the Phoenix food, Melox, and those prepared by Salvo, Freeman, and Mellon. Any of these, given hot, make a delightful breakfast. Porridge and fish, or fish and rice, are very much appreciated. I can only imagine a modern cat being fed porridge and fish, and they're like, what the actual heck is going on? This is absolutely not up to my standards. This is real food. I want cat food. For supper, give a meat meal. Raw meat, horse flesh, liver, tripe, rabbit, or lights. But do not give lights constantly if any lung trouble is suspected among your pets. What's lights? What type of meat is that? Oh, lungs. I'm assuming they were afraid that the raw lungs contain some tuberculosis that they could get infected with. Where several cats are kept, it is advisable to get a mincing machine, as not only does it save considerable time, but the food finely minced is much more digestible than cut up meat, however small. Okay, why would you need several cats in that case to do that? Could you just not? Or maybe because the meat mincing machine is expensive. Okay, that makes sense. Green vegetables should be given in moderation, as they act as a blood purifier. What is the general consensus on cats eating vegetables and that sort of food? Mine obviously won't touch it, but if he was really hungry, would he actually eat it? Because we know now that cats are carnivorous animals. Great attention should be paid to keeping the sanitary pants clean and well supplied with earth or sawdust. Otherwise, Pussy is encouraged to be dirty. That's what I was talking about. Like, why would she? Okay, never mind. For she will not go to a pan which has nothing but wet mold, and she much resents a pan that one of her neighbors has used. All feeding vessels should be kept scrupulously clean and never left standing about. That is true. I mean, cats are extremely clean animals, and it's sometimes annoying how the cat will sense a speck of pee in its litter box and they're literally like, you know what? I'd rather pee on the floor than thank you very much. For reasons that are easily understood, it is necessary, if you wish to have a house pet of unpitiable manners, to have your male cat doctored when he arrives at years of discretion, or in this case, I might say indiscretion. I consider between 5 and 6 months the best time for a cat to be gelded. These cats grow to an enormous size, and their coats are generally very long and thick. They do not shed their fur to the same extent as ordinary cats. As a rule, these cats are more docile and better tempered than others, and though they are considered a lazy set, yet rats and mice will be generally kept under by the household pet. I genuinely did not know they've already neutered cats back then. Just sort of assumed they let them roam free, but this is very interesting, considering the state that the human medicine was in, that they were able to do that to cats back then. So she has mentioned the use of sawdust and earth for the litter box, but then she says, I object to sawdust for young kittens. I have just heard of a case in point where some of the small particles got into the kitten's ear, and the little creature, in its endeavor to get rid of the tickling, caused a bad sore by scratching. And then she says something which I personally find hilarious, because we've all seen those memes of like, oh, I wish I was a Victorian woman so I could just go to the seaside whenever I felt bad. And then she says, there is no doubt that as a pick-me-up for delicate kittens, the sea air is much to be recommended. It is quite wonderful to see the transformation in these little mites after a few days of sunshine by the sea. Their eyes become clear and bright, and their appetites require something more than air and light to satisfy them. So basically, take your kitties on a sea holiday and they're gonna do just fine. Then there is something about male cats. I am sure it is a mistake if you have a stud cat to allow him his liberty one day and then shut him up again. He will pine and fret much more than if kept in continual confinement. It is important, however, that our male cats should have plenty of fresh air and a long enough run to take some exercise. This is kind of true. I mean, we keep our cat indoors. And the few times that he either like run away through the door or we tried to bring him out on a leash, he would then, for days, desperately beg to be let outside again. And we felt so bad because obviously we don't want to keep him a prisoner, but a cat roaming outside is bad for him because he's gonna die within like 2 years of being outside, like statistically. And also he's gonna kill a lot of birds and other critters that should probably be left alone. So he's better off inside, but man, those meows. It is a good plan to try and accustom your cats to be tethered up. My stud cat is quite happy on a long cord. He gets to know about the distance he can walk around. In this way, he has a fair amount of exercise and plenty of fresh air. Okay, so she did not mean taking him on a walk then, but in our cat's case, it just was not working because he was so terrified of the leash and the feeling of having something on his back that he would just crawl, basically, and then he would stay in one spot for half an hour. So it was like not fun for him. But I've seen a lot of people have their cats on the leash, and I think it's a really good solution if you want to let your cat explore the outside without the risks. And apparently that was already the thought in 1902. Again, every time I read an old text, I'm like, literally, they've already known that. Then there is a whole section on cat clubs and cat homes, which is really cool because she's mentioning organizations and places and institutions in London, particularly, that were already back then dedicated to rescuing cats, to helping cats, to raising cats. So here is what she says. I am almost afraid to think, much less to say, how many years ago it was that I attended the first cat show held at the Crystal Palace, which was organized by Mr. Harrison Ware. I well remember, however, when the National Cat Club was founded in 1887. And since that date, the number of fanciers have steadily increased, and many new clubs and societies have been formed. So yeah, she's confirming basically what I said before, which is this was a quickly growing hobby of mostly higher class people, let's face it, but a hobby nonetheless. The National Cat Club, now under the able management of Mrs. Stannard Robinson, holds its two principal shows at the Crystal Palace and the Botanical Gardens, and every year the entries increase and the improvement of the various breeds of cats is most noticeable. Another such organization was the Cat Club, which apparently was a different thing from the National Cat Club, because she says, the Cat Club came into existence in 1898, being instituted by Lady Marcus Beresford, who has done such good work in the cat world. The excellently managed shows, held yearly at St. Stephen's Hall, Westminster, testify to the unwearied exertions and lavish generosity of the founder of the club. These shows have been held in aid of various deserving charities. I feel I cannot bring my remarks to a close without making some reference to those excellent institutions which must appeal to the hearts of the animal-loving public. I mean the homes for poor stray and starving cats. The first organized attempt to deal with this question in London was started in 1895 under the title of the Society for the Protection of Cats. In connection with this, there is now a home for starving and forsaken cats. Mrs. Gordon is a most able and energetic honorable secretary, and devotes a great deal of her time to the poor animals that are brought or sent to Gordon Cottage, King Street, Hammersmith. Let those interested in the humane work carried on at this excellent institution send for a report, or better still, pay a visit to the cottage home, where they will be welcomed between the hours of 2 and 5 p.m. Naturally, the first thing I did was I went straight to Google to see if that cottage still exists, and imagine my disappointment when the first article that showed up was Gordon Cottage due to be demolished to make place for apartment blocks, and that was from 2020 or 2021. This thing survived the Blitz, and now they wanted to demolish it. So I was pissed for a couple of hours until I checked again, and I went on Google Maps, and it seems that they've managed to leave it alone. So the apartment blocks are like right next to it, but I think the actual cottage is still standing. So, whew, okay, we're all good. We're good here. I was about to rant about like modern architecture, but I think we're good for now. In the north of London, there is another excellent institution for lost and starving cats, to which Her Majesty the Queen has graciously given her patronage. This is pretty cool because Queen Victoria herself also had numerous cats, though now that I'm thinking about it, she was actually dead at that point, so that probably refers to Queen Alexandra. This home is entirely dependent on the voluntary aid of sympathetic friends. And when I mentioned that during last year, nearly 12,000 cats were received, some idea will be given of the amount of funds required to carry on this work of mercy. The premises have lately been enlarged, and the Honourable Manageress, I love that. Why don't we use that anymore? This is fantastic. Mrs. Morgan is sorely in need of donations towards the extra expenses incurred. I have personally visited both these institutions and can testify to the excellent arrangements for feeding and also for painlessly destroying them when no homes can be bound. This is something that we're gonna touch upon in like a couple of paragraphs forward, but basically destroying them means obviously like putting the cats under. But at first I was like, huh? And now a few words about the boarding out of our pussies. I mean, I cannot take this seriously. I'm so sorry. I am constantly asked if I know of a good place where cats will be taken care of during the absence of the owner. I wonder that more cat lovers and cat fanciers wishing to add to their incomes do not start boarding houses for cats. I think there is a great opening for such an enterprise. At present, I only know personally of 2 ladies who receive pussies at so much per week. Miss Harper of Briarley Haywards Heath is well known in the fancy, and although I have not been to see her catteries, I am told they are capitally planned. And I have often recommended my friends to send their cats to be taken care of by Miss Harper, who gives her personal attention to all the boarders entrusted to her. Why does she write it in such a way that can be easily turned into a sexual undertone? But also, this is still a problem. I think this is still an issue because we have struggled for a long time with our cat because we used to go on like holiday once a year and he would just not allow anyone in the house. So we would have friends coming over, we would have professional pet sitters that quit on us because they were like, we're not gonna deal with that shit. He was just too much. He was basically being very aggressive. So we found that the only solution is to let him stay in a cat hotel, which sounds awful, but he's actually a very nice man and he only takes care of like a couple of cats at a time. And he gets his own little enclosure, he gets his own little room. And at first, obviously, we were very worried about how he's going to take that. But after a while, this is actually his favorite part of the year, which is very telling on the kind of owners that we are. No, just kidding. But he actually loves it. He loves the guy. He loves his little hotel room. And whenever we come back to like basically get him home, he's like, oh no, not this again. So this is a perfect solution for us. But this guy is literally the only one in the city that does this. And we've tried another person, but they weren't too good. So it is an issue to find a competent pet sitter, someone that will treat your cats nicely, someone that will not treat it as a basically real hotel, because it's not, you know, these are pets. They don't have any idea of what leisure is. So even in 1902, that was an issue because people obviously traveled a lot. They visited their relatives a lot. And I think it was even more of an issue in 1902 because people that owned cats, which I'm assuming primarily meant people that were a little better off, they stayed at places for like months at a time. So I'm assuming that was like a genuine problem. And then there is the last chapter, which is called Miscellaneous, and it's basically just random cat advice held together in one chapter for absolutely no reason. Ordinary hampers may be made more portable for cats if a double strap, such as used for rugs, is run twice through the wickerwork and the handle brought to the top. I need to see what Victorian cat carriers looked like, but it sounds really cute and really vintage. Kittens that live out of doors are constantly in the hot sunshine, readily get sunburned, and their pretty coats become tinged with brown. But do not be unhappy, as this will disappear with their kitten coat. And by fresh air and exercise and the strengthening rays of the sun, the little ones will be laying in a stock of health. This is a theory I have not heard before. A capital collar for a cat is a leather garter lined with flannel. The sharp edges being covered do not injure the frill and fur. So this is basically something that we still use. It is not a bad idea to have warm coats made for our traveling queens when making a long journey in cold weather. Queens were basically female breeding cats. Maybe that's the word that they still use. I don't know. I'm not really familiar with the whole breeding thing. A lady was sent to my stud the other day, clothed in a very smart jacket, through which her front paws were placed, and it was buttoned up on her back. This Poose had also a pair of wash leather boots on her back legs, so her appearance was a little startling. The boots were as a preventive to scratching her eyes or ears. I think only a very amicable cat would stand these trying appendages. That is very true. I mean, I admire cats that are all dressed up in cute sweaters and stuff, but some cats, including mine, will just not do it. But it's always so endearing to think of the fact that in 1902, they were already dressing their cats up in little jackets and boots. The question of hampers versus boxes for our cats when traveling is one that demands attention, more especially during winter. In cold weather, I believe in boxes with ventilation on the top. Then comes the question of how to secure a sufficiency of air, as in spite of our directions, live cat with care, the railway officials will heap luggage on top of our precious cargo. I advise fixing blocks of wood about 2 inches in thickness on the lids, and thus the danger of suffocation would be avoided. It may sound foolish, but there is no covering so warm and airtight as paper, and I have found this cheap commodity most useful and efficient. If you wish to send a puss on a journey in a hamper, then procure a large sheet of brown paper, place the hamper in the middle, and fold it up like a parcel, leaving a square space on top of the lid around the handle. So they basically packed the cats? This is crazy work. We all know what a very trying habit our pussies have of sharpening their claws on choice pieces of furniture. Girl, don't even tell me. They generally show a great partiality for leather-covered chairs. It is quite necessary that cats should exercise their talents, so it is best to provide a large log of wood in the cattery or in the house where they may claw away to their heart's delight. This is, again, something that we still agree on. We need to provide something for our kitties to scratch because otherwise our sofas and armchairs are going to be in trouble. Anyone who has tried getting kittens to sit for their portraits knows how difficult it is to make the fidgety little creatures be quiet. Try holding up a looking glass so that the kit can see its own reflection. This experiment often answers splendidly. A lot of people will probably be like, yeah, because photography took so much time back then, but honestly, this is kind of a myth. Like, this was probably like a second. Even if it moved, it will be a bit blurry, but it was still pretty advanced in 1902. A cat lover with a warm heart is often tempted to take in a wandering puss. By all means, feed the hungry, but beware of letting a stray mix with your own kittens. Many a fancier has been bitten, and in consequence is shy of letting her sympathy run away with her prudence. The enamel unbreakable ware is decidedly the nicest and most serviceable for our pussies. I recently observed upon the very convenient shape of some of these dishes in use in a very complete cattery. I was told they were frying pans, from which the handle had been removed. So if you were wondering what they used as feeding bowls for cats, basically anything. If you wish to pick up a dangerous or strange cat, be careful to seize it quickly and firmly by the back of its neck and hold it out at arm's length. It will then only be able to use strong language. Is that strong language? Basically, I have heard that the best way to part 2 fighting cats is to pour water upon them. I know from a painful experience that it is dangerous to attempt to separate them. The vision of Edwardian ladies reading this and being like, oh, this is going to be useful because I've tried to separate 2 fighting cats before. I'm always surprised at myself at how the thought of people from the past doing normal things that we do is so jarring to me. I don't know what it is about it. I think it must be being disconnected from them and only seeing them in photographs and in rare films from the era, but not actually films depicting them doing anything like everyday activities. It must be that it makes me reading a manual on cats and imagining Edwardian ladies basically grabbing fighting cats by their necks so jarring and so weird to think about. Beware of tying ribbons round your pussy's necks. They look very smart, but I have known of several sad and fatal accidents caused by these pretty adornments. There is the danger of cats being caught and hung in the bushes. Okay, here it gets a little dark. And at first I was like, yeah, this is not cute. But then I realized we sort of still do this. We still euthanize pets that are unwell. So it was just done differently back then. I don't agree with the use of the bucket for poor little rejected kittens, and consider the most humane way of destroying them is to put them in an airtight box with a piece of rag or flannel that has been freely sprinkled with chloroform. So basically, rejected kittens were the kittens from the litter that the mother did not want. And I'm not sure why they felt the need to euthanize them, because they could clearly raise the kittens without the mother. unless they were like very ill. But either way, she is advocating for a humane way to kill them, which is basically euthanizing them with chloroform. They will gradually inhale the fumes and pass away in their sleep. For grown cats, the same method should be adopted, and no cat fancier should be without a small quantity of chloroform. Accidents will happen in their best regulated catteries, and sometimes it is best to put our pets out of their misery. It requires some strength of mind, but if you feel you cannot summon up the courage, then take your paws to the nearest chemist and insist on chloroforming, not poisoning. The fact that she mentions all the other ways that they could be killed, like poisoning or the use of the bucket, which I'm not sure if it's supposed to be a euphemism or they literally like put them in a bucket, that probably means that they've also used those other methods as well. So honestly, putting a piece of rag with chloroform on it does not sound that bad in comparison. I'm wondering like what sort of cats they considered beyond saving at that era, or if they were just like, if a cat is an inconvenience, just take some chloroform. And this is a little bit more terrifying, but I don't actually know what their approach was. Cats are very sensible to strong odors or perfumes. They have a great objection to the smell of orange peel. Is this true? I've never tried it on mine. I am sure they resent the very strong disinfectants used at some shows. They particularly dislike their beds to be scented with any of these fluids or powders. Let me recommend my readers to pay a visit to the Camden Town Institution for Lost and Starving Cats. It is splendidly managed, and all information as to the most humane way of destroying injured or aged cats is readily given. One has to see in order to believe how absolutely painless is the sleep of death in the lethal box for poor pussy. It is a very good thing to accustom your cats to answer to their names, and if you give them some high-sounding title for the register and the show catalog, keep a nice short pet name for home use. It is always a sure sign of good health if, when a cat or kitten has finished a meal, it slowly stretches itself, then sets to work to have a vigorous wash-up, and finally curls itself round into a ball and falls asleep. I love these snippets because you can tell that she was observing the cats very eagerly, and she was writing all this down. You know, years of cat experience speak through her. Nothing is so beneficial to a cat's health as change of air, and fanciers would do well to try and take one or two of their pets with them to the country or seaside. This is especially necessary if you reside in or near any large town. This is an interesting theory. She's mentioning it for the second time, where she's like, treat your cats as Victorian invalids and take them to the seaside. Before writing fini to these chapters, let me say how pleased I have been with the many grateful letters I have received telling me that my notes in Our Cats, so that's the magazine that she was writing articles for, had been of such service. I really had no idea these hints had been so useful and instructive. All these kindly expressions encouraged me to write this handbook, and I sincerely hope that it will be the means of forming still further friendships and of forging more closely the links that already bind me to all true lovers of the dear pussycats. This is a cute and to a cute book. Frances passed away in 1926 when she was 68. In Cat Gossip magazine, that very same year, the editor H.C. Brooke wrote, "The year which is now passing has brought about some sad partings. At the very outset, we lost the fairy godmother of the cat fancy, Miss Francis Simpson, whose tongue and pen for half a century had been placed at the service of Poose." Please, why would they write that her tongue was at the service of Poose? I cannot, this reads so badly in today's lingo. But either way, obviously, we're not laughing. She died. It's sad. I'm sorry. I mean, it would be an honor to be called the fairy godmother of the cat fancy, not gonna lie. I think she must have done a tremendous job for the hobbyists. And she might well be one of the reasons why owning a cat as a pet is so popular nowadays, because she basically popularized it by her written works. And she actually also apparently sold her cats to the US because back then the US cat fancy was not as developed as the UK. So she was trying to sort of kickstart the whole hobby in the US. So if you are from America and if you have a cat, it might be because of her. It might be because of her work. But I have to say, most of the advice is not shockingly old. What I mean is that a lot of the advice is something that we basically still agree on. And I'm assuming it's because a lot of things that we do with cats come from the observations that we've made along the years and along the decades, and apparently along centuries as well. Some of it is biology and science, but a lot of it is just our observations that we make as we go. So things like cat's diet that she's described is probably not the best, but then the behavioral things are more on point because she was there. She saw the cats, she had the cats, she owned the cats, and she studied the cats. So they are not that far off. Anyway, I think that's it for today. Hope you've enjoyed this one and give your little kitty extra pets today in honor of Francis Simpson. Don't forget to check out my Patreon at patreon.com/textory, and I'll hear you in another episode. Bye!